Alright, so I'm getting ready to start working on this rear center section. And I got it sitting over the mulch bed right now because it's pretty nasty inside. I'm just going to take some Dawn, soak some of that grease mess in there, clean it up really well. I also got quite a bit in here in our hydraulic reservoir. It's pretty black in there. So we'll get all this cleaned up inside. Won't really worry too much on the outside since it's all going to get sandblasted anyway. This is mainly just try to get some of this gunk out of here so that the sand don't stick to it. Because I'm going to mask everything off, but this sand will still get in there. I mean, that stuff's like magic. No matter what you do, it'll get in the stuff. So here's the before anyway. I'll get it all sprayed off, cleaned up, and we'll go from there. Now, one thing to note right there is the hydraulic pressure relief valve. I don't have a tool out here to clean that, but as soon as I get it cleaned and dried off, that will be removed. Okay, so there's what we got after rinsing everything with Dawn. Still kind of black in there. I'll hit it with some brake cleaner, try to get it a little redder. There's a couple places I noticed where the glip tall's been knocked off. I've got some of that I'll put on it. And like right in this area. Well, actually no, that's just grease. So maybe a brake cleaner will get that off. And we got this in here pretty decent for now. We'll hit with some cleaner, brake cleaner. See if we can't make this thing nice, pretty, and red in here again. We're going to go ahead and take out our relief valve that I mentioned in the video right when I was getting ready to clean it. I've already pulled out some of these bolts. These are just 9/16 bolts. And this plate, this little dowel here, has an O-ring in it, so it's kind of hard to get it to move. You may have to pry it off. Be sure you change that O-ring when we go back together. Same with the gasket, change the gasket. Our relief valve is right here. A couple of ways you can get this valve out, and it kind of depends on how stubborn your valve is. It's threaded for a 1/4 20 bolt right here. You can put that bolt in there and take a pry bar, get underneath it and catch it and lift it up, or you can use a socket and create like a press to pull it out, or a slide hammer. But I'm going to try the pry bar method because that's what the service manual says. Oh! Okay, well, that came out pretty easy. Alright, there's no real way to test these things since they're designed to pop off at like 2000 psi. So you can either replace it, if it's unknown its condition, or you can reuse it. And unfortunately for me, since my lift does not work, I don't know if this thing works or not. But for now, I'm just going to clean everything up on it and reuse it. However, I do still have 2 O-rings here and here that we need to replace. So the next thing I'm going to do is the brake bushings, brake rod, cross shaft, or whatever. That's these little guys that are in here. Now they make a tool that you can buy to drive those bushings in and out. I don't have one. I'm probably going to look into getting one since I'm going to be installing new bushings everywhere. But I'm basically just going to take a screwdriver and a hammer and drive it in between the bushing and the cast iron casting to collapse the bushing until they fall out. On these bushings, they're what's called a split design. This is not the actual bushing that goes here. This is actually one that came as my rebuild kit for an engine piston pin, which as you see, it's way too big. But see how it's split like that? Sometimes you can find that split, sometimes you can't. If you can find that split and you run a screwdriver down through there and collapse this, the bushing will basically just fall right out. Like I said, the other option is a bushing driver. It looks like on mine, the split is right here at the top. So let's see if I can get this screwdriver down in it. Wow, that bushing is wore out. Literally that quickly it fell apart. I can see this other one down here, and it's the same way. I'll knock it out real quick. So there's the other one. It's just as thick, or wide, whatever you want to refer to it as. So there's those bushings out. We got this done. So that's kind of it on the bottom as far as stuff that needs to be disassembled before we can sandblast. The only other thing on this rear end housing that I'm worried about is this rocker. And I tried to get it out last night. I was unsuccessful, so I'm going to have to cut the pin, which unfortunately means I'm going to have to try to fabricate it because I don't think there's one available for a row crop. One other thing we have to worry with, down here in the bottom, which I'm pretty sure you can't see it at the current angle, which I'll get a better one later, is our PTO shaft seal. This seal is the exact same seal as what goes back here at the back on the actual PTO shaft. That seal will separate our hydraulic reservoir from our rear end reservoir. Because you want gear oil in the rear end and you want hydraulic fluid up here in the front end. Because you put gear oil up here, it's going to be too thick and your hydraulics won't work properly. Now, you can put hydraulic in the rear. The newer 1000 series, the 65 up, actually run that as their spec. It's a little thinner, obviously, because it's a hydraulic versus a gear oil. But how many of those tractors are out there still working to this day? So, I mean, it's not going to hurt it. So I actually think that's how I have my 861 set up, in case one of these seals leaks on the PTO or my pinion. So either will work. You know, you can separate them or have it all the same. It's not really going to affect anything. Now I just need to come in here and kind of clean this up a little bit with some brake cleaner to try to get the last bit of oil residue out, and then it'll be ready to be sandblasted and painted. Alright, so now we got our rear end all repainted. One of the first things I'm going to do is go ahead and put these new brake shaft bushings in. This number for them is a 78-2477. And to install them, you're going to need a bushing install tool. If you don't have this, just use like a piece of aluminum or brass, you know, something that won't damage a little bronze bushing. These things are pretty easy to install. I'll be doing quite a few on this tractor. But if you have the tool, just set it down on the tool. Stick your bushing into your hole. Tap it and get it good and square. Make sure everything's nice and square and started, and then just hammer it until it's flush. Okay, and we're flush. And there's our bushing installed. Okay, the next thing we want to address on this rear end housing is this inner PTO shaft seal. Now in total, the PTO shaft has 3 seals on it. You have the one back here at the rear that everybody knows about that leaks all the time. Then you have one that sits right here to separate your hydraulics from your rear gear oil system. Now, if you decide to run the same oil in both of these systems, this seal is not overly important. However, if you run gear oil in the rear end and hydraulic oil in your hydraulics, you need to make sure that seal's good. The third seal on the PTO is actually where your PTO output shaft is on the transmission. Because there again, if you run gear oil in your transmission, then hydraulic oil in your hydraulics, and gear oil in your rear end, you have to keep all this stuff separate. Now there's also a bushing behind this seal down here. I'm not going to change it on this one for the simple reason that it looks pretty good and it's a $30 bushing, and I don't really know how much I'm going to use PTO on this tractor anyway. So just inspect that bushing. If you see wear, change it. It's kind of like the bushings down here on the side. Just knock them out with a screwdriver and then drive them back in. As for the seal, I'm going to see if I can just get it out with just a pry bar. Well, it's trying to come out, but it ain't wanting to cooperate. Well, it ended up just breaking the seal instead of prying it out. Well, got part of it out. There's a little more of it. And some more of it. So now the only thing left in here is the actual shell of the seal. Okay, and there's the rest of the seal. And there's the last little shell. So now we're ready to install our new seal. Now, these seals claim to be a double lip seal, but to me they're not a double lip seal. Yes, we have the 2 ridges here, but this one here does not have a spring on it, like this side. So it's kind of hard to decide which way to install this thing. Because here's our old seal, and the spring on the old seal was towards the hydraulics. I looked at the service manual and it says on the new seal, install it with the letters forward. Well, the problem is this seal is not a factory seal, it has no letters on it. So I go back and look at the old seal that has forward on it, and it has a C and an R. Well, to put that forward, the spring is into our hydraulic reservoir. So we're going to install this seal with our spring into our hydraulic reservoir, which basically, if you change your PTO seal on the end, you're going to do the same thing. Back there, your spring will be into your rear end, and the little dust cover would be towards the outside. So just remember, springs are towards the front. Even on the transmission shifter, it's going to be towards the front. So as long as you do springs forward, you should be good. Now, since this seal does not have any paint on it here, I'm going to put a little bit of RTV on it. So to make sure I get a good seal, I'm going to just wipe down their bore with some brake cleaner. So it cleans it up really well. Gets rid of all the oil residue. And then I'm going to also wipe off the seal because there's a little bit of oil on it. Okay, so now we're just going to take our RTV and we're just going to put a little thin layer around it. Like I said, it's not much. And we're going to install it with our spring forward. We'll take our seal installer and just drive it until it's flush. And if you have any excess silicone, wipe it off, which I pretty much have none. So that's good. So now our seal is installed. And there's a little bit better shot of the seal down in there. You can kind of see that bushing in behind it as well. So the next thing we want to get in here is going to be our pinion, which is rebuilt with all new bearings, with the exception of the pinion support bearing. Just because that one's expensive and there's nothing wrong with mine. Here's all of our original bolts replated. Not too bad for a 60-year-old boat. When we installed this, there is no seal here. This is just literally a press fit. So when we install it, there's actually a little dowel pin right here. Down here in about the 5 o'clock position, if you're looking towards the front of it, is a hole where this little dowel pin will go into. We need to line that back up. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do, since it's going to be a while before I run this tractor, I'm going to go put a little bit of my engine assembly grease on this pinion bearing snout. And then down here in the actual bearings, I'm going to put some assembly lube. And this grease is designed to basically melt in oil, which I still don't want to go crazy. I just want enough on here just to coat it so we don't have any rust issues. And one other thing, this pinion is part of my Selecto Speed conversion. Since the Selecto Speed has a fine spline output shaft, like 23 splines, and my 5-speed with live PTO has a 10 spline output, I got a 10 spline pinion gear to put back. And since mine's a rowcrop tractor, this pinion is actually out of a 960, which is also a rowcrop tractor. So they should be compatible without any problems. And like I said, I'm just going to drizzle some assembly lube down in here on these bearings. Primarily just this rear one. I'll get the front one once I get it installed. So most of that will run out anyway before I even get to the point of running the tractor, but something's better than nothing. So, remember our dowel pin. Let me add a little bit of oil on these two surfaces, see if it'll help slide it some, because all this stuff's dry. So now we got that all lubed up. Slide it down here, keep in mind our dowel pin location. probably have to tap this in since it is a press style fit. So our dowel pin is right down here. Our bolt holes are off, so let's try to get them straight as we can. When you tap this thing in, do not tap on the pinion, tap on the housing. Notice I'm just barely tapping it, I'm not wailing on it. Okay, so there it went in. Let's go ahead and get a bolt in here to help line us up. Okay, so I have these 2 bolts in here to help line me up. And I'm just going to go ahead and center our pinion all the way down. Let's give it a quick spin here. We're in the support, everything looks good. So now we need to pull these bolts back out. And we got to put our seals in. Okay, the first seal we got to do is an O-ring. This is a seal from New Holland. It's about a $7 O-ring. However, if you consider where this is, it's really worth a $7 O-ring. Because the only way to get this back apart in the future is to split the tractor again. Unless you're still running a selecto speed where you can disconnect the drive shaft and then just slip it on there. But if you are not running a selecto speed, you gotta split the tractor again. So, with that being said, there's the part number. It's 818-27354. And that should be the correct one for all of the 100 series type tractors. So we're going to take this O-ring, and on our pinion support there is a groove here. This O-ring is going to fit down in this groove, and hopefully it'll stay there without any kind of glue or sealer. Okay, and that one's stuck. Our next one is going to be the actual shaft seal, which is in this support. And I've already installed this seal. This seal crosses to an SKF number 15141. Right there. Now this seal is not as thick as the original, because as you see, it's not fully seated here or here. So this is kind of a judgment call. However, on your pinion, if you have a groove wore in it, you know, look at that groove. Try to either avoid that groove. If it's really wore, if you have a nice slick surface, put it there. It's all judgment call. Just do what is going to seal. When we put this seal in, put a little bit of lubricating silicone on here, just to help slide it on and to give it something for lubrication whenever we do finally start the tractor. So we're going to slide it on. And our seal's now in there nice and straight and square. We're going to put our bolts in it. Now, torque on these bolts is 80 to 100 foot-pounds. So I'm going to shoot in the middle and go for 90. Just like everything we tighten, we're going to go in a crisscross pattern. We don't want to go in a circle. So there's our pinion installed.
Okay, now once you get it torqued down, give it a spin check. Make sure it spins. If it will not spin, your most likely culprit is going to be your pinion support bearing back here. And I'll spin the camera and get you a picture here in a second. But if this bearing back here is too tight, your pinion will not spin.
Okay, if the pinion does not spin, you need to look right here. See how there's a gap right there between the pinion gear and this dark spot right here? That's actually the pinion support bearing. If you do not have this gap, and there's no spec for this, but just a visual gap, that's what you need to check. Because there's no depth anywhere on here of how to set this thing. So make sure you have that gap and make sure it spins. Okay, the last couple things that we need to address on this rear end housing before it's ready to be reassembled back is our hydraulics. Now, that little hole right there is where your pressure relief goes. I have mine separate just from where I sandblasted it. I didn't want sand in it. And I'm getting ready to show you how to repair that. Next thing you need to do is these two tubes. This is your return, and this is your pressure. You need to inspect these, make sure you don't see any cracks or holes in them. If you do, now's the time to change them. If you don't, just move on, there's nothing to worry about. Okay, so we got our gasket made, which was just made from some 1/32 Velcro rubber paper. You can buy this gasket if you want, if you don't feel comfortable making it. Now for our 3 O-rings, which are here, here, and here, I took them off and I matched them up. This O-ring right here, you're going to want to find is a number 13, a dash 13. And what I mean by dash 13, it's a 7/16 inside diameter with a 1/16 cross section, which means it's a 9/16 OD. This one is going to be a dash 12. So this O-ring is going to have an ID of 3/8 with a cross section of a 1/16, so it's going to have an OD of 1/2 inch. And this bigger one here is going to be a dash 115. So that's your 3 O-ring sizes right there, if you don't want to purchase them from the dealership. And then we got our gasket. Okay, so we're going to slide our relief valve in here. And then we're going to put our plate back. Okay, we're going to torque these bolts to 35 to 45 foot-pounds. Okay. Now I have to go back and touch up my paint, which that's not really going to be a problem because the way that I'm painting this tractor anyway, I'm going to be touching up bolts everywhere. And the only thing I have left to do is just to pull out these 2 plugs here. You can't see one, it's off the frame, but I'm going to pull the hydraulic drain plug and the rear diff drain plug and just put some pipe dope on those and get them tightened down, because they will not come back out until it's time to service these in the future. So I'll do that, touch up my paint, and this one's ready to go back on the stands.